Okay, so 1 minute. Hello.
Yes, good morning. We can hear you.
Okay, good. So sorry for my colleague from DPPA is trying to log in, but apparently he has some challenges. Maybe we remarks you made. Remarks you made. Can I know what you said?
Yes, apologies. I don't think I heard you properly. Perhaps as we wait for our colleagues from GPPA, we can start with the opening for the sake of time.
Okay, so thank you very much. I think he's going to join us shortly. So you are right. We have been waiting for a while, and I think we can start. Now, first of all, on the behalf of the Ministry of Trade, Industry, Regional Integration and Employment, we want to thank ITC and also GPPA for collaborating with the Ministry of Trade to under the trade in the Gambia policy. This is the second type of policy dialogue that this partnership is organizing to see how we promote women access to public procurement. This particular public procurement policy for women. The objective of this year's policy dialogue is to provide input for the development of preferential public procurement policy for women in the Gambia. As I said, you recall last year, our collaborative effort was towards seeing how we push forward women-owned businesses to access more public procurement in the Gambia. So this event is a follow-up, and we believe that enhancing the opportunities for women enterprises to do business with the government through public procurement can definitely help in the development of many micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. Particularly the fact that the government policy is to see how businesses get established, they grow and create jobs to help us reduce poverty. So the ministry is therefore pleased to work with all the stakeholders, particularly our colleagues in government, the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs, and also the Gambia Public Procurement Authority in the efforts to provide these important inputs to see how we can promote the developments of preferential public procurement policy for women. This event, these efforts, if we are successful, will be an important instrument for economic empowerment of women. And it is definitely going to be very supportive and positive to women-owned businesses, and then will be a beneficiary to the whole economy. The Ministry of Trade is therefore committed to building the capacities of women entrepreneurs for increased participation in the business sector, including access to public procurement. This is why the SheTrades initiative in the Gambia is important to the ministry. And through the project, we are working with different women entrepreneurs to improve their capacities to trade more. Under the project, we are supporting women entrepreneurs to improve their business models, improve the quality and packaging of their products, and also improve their access to finance to expand their businesses through SheTrades many grants. We therefore thank this partnership of all the stakeholders. We also want to thank the Gambia Women Advocacy Group for the efforts that they are doing in terms of promoting women access to procurement. through this collaboration, we believe that we will be able to identify the necessary instruments that the government should put in place to promote women, to give women advantage and also promote their access to public procurement. I therefore want to thank GPPA. Unfortunately, they are yet to join us, and also thank ITC, the Gambia Women Advocacy Group, and then the SheTrades project for once again organizing this important event. We look forward to very fruitful deliberations to help us in shaping our policies and also coming up with more affirmative legislations towards enhancing more access of women enterprises to public procurement. On that note, I want to thank you for your attention. Thank you. So what we will do, given that we have spoken to the Ministry of GPPA, they have agreed to moderate these sessions, but unfortunately they are late. So what I'll do is we will moderate the session before they are coming, and if they join, we will allow it to offer to them. Without taking much of your time, I will now call perhaps ITC if they can make remarks. Then, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Abdullah. I will be providing the remarks for ITC. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning to everyone who doesn't know me yet. My name is Elena Maya-Besting and I'm the project manager for SheTrades in the Gambia. I want to thank you all for being here today for today's consultation on increasing the participation of women in public procurement opportunities in the Gambia. Of course, I'm sure I share the feeling with you that it would be much nicer if we could have all met in person today. But we're also very happy that we're able to continue this work virtually and that so many of you are here on this call. And here I really want to thank our partners, of course, at the Ministry of Trade, Industry, Regional Integration and Employment, as well as at GPPA. For all their work on making this happen today. Now, following the remarks by my colleague Abdullah, I just can emphasize once more the close collaboration that we have had with MOTAI over the last years. In 2018, we launched the SheTrades in the Gambia project, and over the last about 2 years, we have trained and supported over 200 women entrepreneurs and women farmers. We've improved the access to finance for about 100 women-owned businesses and connected many of them to markets, allowing these women-owned businesses to secure about $3 million in deals, a lot of which is also through procurement deals. And here I really want to thank the Women in Business Advocacy Group that Abdullah also mentioned already for all their work. And I know a few of the members are here with us today. Thank you for all the work that you have been doing, advocating tirelessly for the access of women entrepreneurs to these opportunities already, while no preferential policy has been in place. But of course, we also want to continue this work and see how we can influence the policy environment to be a better policy environment for women entrepreneurs, for which you're of course here today. And this work started in January of this year when MOTAI, GPPA and ITC co-hosted a 2-day workshop on the challenges that are currently stopping women from benefiting from public procurement opportunities that of course also many of you participated in. And at the time we discussed Oh, let me see if I can add my video so you can also see me. So yeah, if at the time in January, we discussed many options, and an important one that all the stakeholders agreed on was the creation of a preferential policy, and as well as pursuing the option to revise the Procurement Act. And this is, of course, why we're here today. Maybe just, to say a few words on the background. I think we're all aware that the public procurement market is a huge market. It makes up about 10 to 25% of GDP in most countries, but women usually only access about 1% of these opportunities, which of course is stopping women-owned businesses from using this opportunity to scale their businesses, from growing and from creating more jobs, which leaves governments as a buyer, but also as a policymaker, a really big opportunity to still further promote job creation, innovation, and the growth of SMEs. And in the context of the current COVID-19 pandemic, this is, of course, a more important topic than ever. While we're seeing a lot of governments stepping up and supporting small businesses through unprecedented measures, and many governments also committing to building back better, we really think that procurement opportunities will be one of the major opportunities for women entrepreneurs. And we have seen this in the Gambia, where access to deals as part of the emergency food aid, for example, during COVID-19, has been a huge opportunity. So this really takes me to a recent publication by ITC together with the W20 and International Chamber of Commerce, as well as UPS, on women entrepreneurs in the post-COVID-19 era. We can share access to this publication with all of you. And this publication includes recommendations for the private sector, government, and the international community at large on how to better support women in business. And here I also want to take the opportunity to thank Her Excellency Vice President Dr. Aissatou Touré for her contribution to the publication, and also for all her work on women's empowerment in the Gambia, and also her advocacy on the procurement issue. Now, if we're looking ahead, we're expecting that government spending will still increase in the context of the pandemic. So really, this, I think, is a very timely discussion. Now let me just plug in a few words on ITC's resources on this topic. Public procurement is one of the 7 focus areas for the Global SheTrades initiative. And we have a range of resources on this topic, ranging from an e-learning course for procuring officers to Procurement Map, which is a website you can also all access on public tenders and the legislation that's in favor of women in different countries, as well as a new guide with action-oriented toolkits for policymakers, really to focusing on how to better incorporate women in procurement, government procurement. And this will be online, available for everyone by the end of this week. But we have the great pleasure of having the authors of this new procurement guide with us today, who will be helping us to facilitate the conversation. So I think this is really a great a privilege that we have today. And yeah, together with these 2 experts that are joining us today, we will be gathering all your inputs over the course of the next 2 hours, as well as the 2-hour session on Thursday, that will then go into a draft policy that we will share with you for your consideration and validation at a later stage. Now let me hand over, or actually before I go there, let me maybe also look just briefly, already let you speak you to the objectives of today's session. So as I already mentioned, we had a first session in January that most of you participated in. So we really want to build on that consensus and you know, take it from there. Then we want to discuss topics relating to this preferential procurement policy that we had agreed on in January, and then gather inputs from all of you for the development of this policy, as well as on the question of how to define a women-owned business. And we will be doing this in 2 sessions, as I mentioned. So the first one is today. The next one is on Thursday. Today, we'll be really doing more looking at well, it'll be more presentations today and a bit more on these specific topics. And then on Thursday, it will be much more open discussion. So we'll give you a bit of time to ease into the discussion today, and then we'll be expecting to hear even more from you on Thursday. Maybe with this, let me pass back to Abdullah, or I'm not sure if our colleagues from GPPA have joined us by now.
Thank you, Elena. I think our colleague from DPPA, they are yet to log in. Anna is following with them, so perhaps later they can join, they will join us. Now, thank you, Elena, for the remarks. And then now we will move to the next levels in terms of the presentation of the outcomes of the stakeholder discussions in January 2020. So ITC is leading us on this. Elena, can I know who is leading us on this discussion?
Hello, Abdullah. Perhaps I can jump in and support Elena on this. So for those who I have not met, my name is Anahita Vasudevan, also with the ITC SheTrades initiative, working on data and policy issues along with Judith Fesahai, who is leading on this work. Let me just share my video with you all if I can. So that you can see me and we can make this conversation a bit more dynamic. So I can perhaps just start with the session overview quickly and go into the outcomes of the discussion from January. So for today's session, we'll focus on introducing the policy, the purpose of creating a preferential policy for women, discuss a bit on the definition of a women-owned business, understanding that this is integral to discussions surrounding public procurement, although we would like to table individual comments to maybe a dedicated discussion on this topic because it may take a bit of time. Then we can talk about measures that can be put in place to support women and targeted assistance strategies. And then on Thursday, we will start again at 10 a.m. Gambia time. We've shared the link with you as well, so you can join us, and we really hope you will. So we'll continue on targeted assistance strategies and move on to a discussion on roles and responsibilities and who can, take over, in terms of responsibility, implementation, how we monitor and evaluate how the policy works, and then decide on next steps from there. And just to clarify that the overall goal of the session is to really gather your inputs, and then we will share with you a draft policy for consideration and circulate it amongst the stakeholders for comments before submitting, a final draft. So just to recap the outcomes of the January 2020 discussion, we had, I believe, more than 100 participants that joined us, ranging from different organizations, institutions. Just to name a few, we had Ministry of Trade, Industry, Regional Integration and Employment, of course, co-hosting. We had Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs, Gambia Public Procurement Authority, Gambia Women's Chamber of Commerce, the Gambia Chamber of Commerce and Industry, different financial institutions, women entrepreneurs, associations. So it was a really great turnout. And as a result of this discussion, we came to a few different areas for action. So the first was the need to collect relevant gender disaggregated data on women-owned business to really inform what the policy could look like, to discuss different options of the definition of a women-owned business, as I mentioned before, to work on making tender information and procedures on for tender for bidding more widely accessible. Also to create a database of products and services that are provided by women-owned businesses to make it easier to supply from them as well. And then on the training side, to support women-owned businesses to actually strengthen their bids to make sure that they're the most competitive, and to actively seek out opportunities to advertise and encourage bids from women-owned businesses, and to also look at opportunities to provide awareness raising, sensitization for procuring officers, and even find opportunities to increase the number of officers that are women if possible. And of course, the reason why we're here today, to look at how to develop a preferential policy for women alongside a longer process of revising legislation, and to see if there are additional stakeholders that need to be part of the discussion. So we hope that we can use this to build on the conversation for today. And shall I hand over the floor to Astrid and Jona, if that's okay, to start presenting from this screen?
Yes, Anna, thank you. That's okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jonna van der Krift, and I'm working with Astrid ter Wiel, who will be speaking after me. I had the honor to be in the Gambia in January this year for the country dialogues that we did. So I know from personal experience that a lot has been discussed and a lot of good work has already been done. And we would like to continue this today. And in today's session we have some assumptions. Well, and a lot of this has already been confirmed by Abdoulaye Jammeh, for example, that the Gambia is very keen on developing a gender-responsive procurement policy. It's not a discussion whether the Gambia wants to do this. We are working on this and it will be implemented. And everyone on this call is well informed on why this is necessary, because there are certain barriers that especially women-owned businesses face when they try to compete for the public tenders in the Gambia. Well, after this, as also Elena explained, we, as in Astrid and myself, we will draft this preferential procurement policy for the Gambia for you to comment on. And we are assuming that the people in this call can make decisions, or for example, on which targeted assistance strategies are suitable in the Gambia. We will discuss targeted assistance strategies later on, but it's important that the people in this session can speak on behalf of the various organizations. Obviously, the official decision process will follow. The preferential procurement policy that we are discussing is aimed at women-owned businesses. As we discussed in January also, it is important to have a definition of what a women-owned business is. So when is a business entitled to, for example, targeted assistance? There is a parallel process ongoing, and Anna will explain a bit more about that, because it's a very it's a large project actually in cooperation with the Swedish Institute for Standards. And Anna will update you on that, and we are assuming that also the Gambia will follow what comes out of that process with regard to the definition of what a women-owned business constitutes. Anna, could you do the next slide? So why are we here? Well, I don't think this needs a lot of explanation, as Elena and Abdoulaye and Jammeh have explained this. And the Gambia has already made a decision to work on a preferential procurement policy to support women-owned businesses. But anyway, it's always good to explain this again and also make it easier for you to explain it to other people who are not so closely involved in this process. If women-owned businesses participate, then there will be fiercer competition, and also the competition will be more diverse, which leads at the country level to more gender equality in general. It will also lead to economic growth, and it will lead to the economic empowerment of women. All of these are obviously related. If women are economically empowered, they tend to invest their money in their family. This has been researched, and if money is invested in the family, then more children go to school, more children have then a higher level of education and have better chances on the market themselves. So there's, let's say, a double effect. But the procuring entity itself will also benefit from a higher participation of women-owned businesses, as you get more value for money due to more fierce competition and also more diverse competition. So you might get higher value for money, and it would also increase the number of innovative solutions that may come from the women-owned businesses, but also from the other competitors that feel the competition becoming stronger and start to invest more in, for example, product development. Anna, please, next slide. So why do we need a procurement policy? Well, this figure, I will not explain it into detail, but it's basically like a decision tree. Some countries have legislation in place that allows for preferential treatment of women-owned businesses. It's often legislation that allows for preferential treatment for minority groups, of which women-owned businesses. If such legislation is not yet in place, which is the case in the Gambia, we know that there is ongoing work to change that, but a policy can be adopted and implemented quicker. And legislation takes longer. It may take years due to the official process that you have to go through. So if you want to go ahead and you don't want to wait for legislation to have become effective, it's good to start with a preferential procurement policy. And that's what we are working on also today. Next slide, Anna. Well, here you see my colleague from the Public Procurement Research Center and myself. We have been working with ITC already since 2015, and Elena mentioned that there's, for example, an e-learning course for public procurement officials who want to provide opportunities to women-owned businesses, and we have had the honor to develop that course, for example. Next slide, Anna, please. Okay, and now I would like to hand over to my colleague Astrid, who will take you to the design of the policy. Thank you.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Jonna. My name is Astrid.
Sorry, Elena, sorry, please, for interruption. Just to let you know that our colleagues from GPA, they are already on board. We have Mr. Sambora from GPA.
Just take forward and I also.
Thank you.
I couldn't quite hear that. Anna, I don't think that you, are we still connected?
Yes, so I think the call has dropped and we're facing some connectivity issues. So perhaps if he's able to sign on again, we can give him the floor also for remarks on behalf of GPPA.
Sure.
So I'll continue to watch if he's able to sign on.
Okay,
and
thank
let
you.
know. Thank you.
Okay, let's continue for now. Like I said, my name is Astrid, and together with Jonna, I am taking you through the topics that should be part of preferential procurement policy. And we really would like to get your input both today and Thursday to be able to draft this policy. So I hope you're still with us, and we'll be asking you a few questions, and we are really looking for your input. So when you look at the slide, oh, please go back, yeah. When you look at the slide, you see that normally a policy would comprise 6 topics, and we will guide you through these 6 topics. This is the policy introduction, the purpose of the policy, the definition of the women-owned businesses, measures, targeted assistance strategies, and responsibilities. Per topic, we have questions for you, and we need answers to these questions. So I would like to start. Are there any questions from you before we dive into the policy? If there is, you can either take the floor or raise your hand, and Anna will give you the floor. I don't see any hand raised. Well, feel free to step in at any point, and because we would like the input to come from you. Anna, can we go to the next slide? Thank you. So the policy introduction is actually what would be mentioned in the policy to introduce the topics that are following. So for example, in the case of the Gambia is actively working towards gender inclusive public procurement, as you all know. And in the Gambia, it is estimated that 1% of the public procurement budget is spent at women-owned businesses. Women entrepreneurs are mainly found in the informal economy, and they constitute a vast majority of Gambia's micro enterprises. A central overview of registered women-owned businesses has yet to be made. Next slide, please. The Gambia Public Procurement Act 2014 is currently under review, as you all know. It provides for preferential treatment for domestic contractors, but not for women-owned businesses yet. The policy addresses the options for preferential treatment for women-owned business. So this policy that we're going to draft together addresses the options for preferential treatment and lays an official fundament for a gender-inclusive procurement approach in the Gambia. We don't necessarily have to call it a preferential public procurement. Some people also refer to it as gender-responsive public procurement policy, but this is needed to give the participation of women-owned businesses in the public arena a boost. So this is text that you could mention in the policy to introduce the next 5 topics. So my question to you is there anything else that we really need to mention in the introduction of the policy? Who would like to take the floor?
So please, if I could jump in, if you'd like to speak, you should be able to unmute yourself so we can open the floor for any comments.
If there are no comments, that can also mean that we have now already covered all the introductory topics. So in short, it would be the Gambia finds gender responsive public procurement very important. Action needs to be taken, and this policy shapes that action.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't see any hand raised. I don't see anybody unmuting.
Maybe can I ask, maybe for example, Ramu, I know you've done a lot of research also on the views of women entrepreneurs and women in leadership in the Gambia. Do you have anything from that you think should be included? Or I don't know, I think we have a couple of representatives from the Youth Chamber of Commerce. From a youth perspective, is there anything you'd want to mention? Or we have also a few members of the Women in Business Advocacy group here. Emily, for example. Is there anything else, like also based on your experience and the advocacy work you have been doing, that you think should still be added?
I'm thinking. I need time to think about it.
Yes, I see we have a hand raised also from Ashmi. I can unmute you.
Hello, good morning. Yes, I just want to inquire the issues regarding public procurement generally, because I want to be sure whether this particular policy will just be for the government-funded procurement, or is it including all international procurement? That's that, I mean, the ones funded by the multilateral institutions, because I don't think it is covered in this introduction. Thank you.
Well, in the topics of the policy, so this is only the introduction. In the further topics that we will be discussing, we can address which procurement it would apply to. But in general, you would say that the policy covers all kinds of procurement. I think it will become more clear once we go through the topics, and then you'll see how it folds out. So let's keep this in mind, and then we can come back to it on Thursday and see whether your query has been addressed.
Okay, thank you.
And I think somebody before this, somebody else said, I need some time to think about it. That is very fine. If you have some comments or input that comes to you today, tomorrow, maybe on Thursday, you can just either mention it in the comments during the call, or you could email to ITC, and then we can also incorporate your afterthoughts. So maybe we should continue. Anna, can you give us the next slide, please? Yes, Jonna will say something about the purpose of the policy. Jonna, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Well, this is an important question that we would like to pose now. It may become more clear when we are discussing the various options, but the purpose of the policy that we will include is quite important, because you can either choose to help women-owned businesses to participate in public tenders, which might mean that you will improve, for example, communication about the tender opportunities, or provide skills training to them, design your tenders in such a way that it becomes easier for them to participate. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they will also more often win public tenders. If you want to increase the percentage of public tenders won by women-owned businesses, there are additional actions you can take as a government to ensure this. And that is, for example, the use of a reservation scheme, where you could have a tender and say, well, only women-owned businesses are allowed to compete in this tender. Because in that way, you are sure that a women-owned business will actually win the tender. So this is an important distinction to make, because it determines the kind of actions that the Gambia will take and that the procuring entities are allowed to take in establishing the more inclusion of women-owned businesses in public procurement. So a question to you as participants is, what should the purpose of the policy be in your view? Or do you maybe have different or additional insights as to what the purpose of the policy has to be? If I just may take a little, make a little start, when in the January consultations, in the policy dialogues, we did discuss the option of reservation schemes, for example. And if you would adopt that, you are actively increasing the percentage of public tenders won by women-owned businesses. But it's well, it's a policy decision whether you are looking at increasing participation, with the ultimate objective, obviously, to have more women-owned businesses win, or but to ensure also in certain tenders that they will win. Who would like to respond to this? I'll check if I see any hands raised yet. Or maybe people have a question about what the difference means.
Perhaps it would be good to clarify and maybe give an example of what you meant, just to show the two different options that you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, the most simple one is, I guess, if the objective is to increase the percentage of public tenders won, then you will have to implement targeted assistance strategies, such as I said, reservation schemes, or, for example, say that it is obligatory to have a subcontractor who qualifies as a woman-owned business, or maintain a price preference, which means that an offer from a woman or women-owned business gets additional points on the price part of the offer, which gives her a clear advantage in relation to the non-women-owned businesses. So then you really put the woman-owned business at an advantage compared to all other competitors. The Gambian Procurement Act allows for this. That's important. On the other hand, you can say no for certain reasons. For example, we feel that the women-owned businesses should do this at their own force, and they don't need to have special privileges or put it at an advantage. So we will implement actions, but they will be only related to reducing the barriers that women-owned businesses encounter, such as unnecessarily complex tender documents or excessive requirements, disproportionate requirements, or little access to information about tenders, or little tendering skills. So then you can start to improve your communication, to start to simplifying the tender procedures, and you can start training women-owned businesses, which doesn't necessarily put them at an advantage or give them a certain privilege, but it does increase their participation. And as an indirect effect, it is supposed, obviously, to also increase the percentage of public tenders won by them. But it's the two are different. Is there anyone who would like to respond?
Yona, I just have a question for you. Perhaps answering this question might also become easier once we start to talk about the different targeted assistance strategies also.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And we discuss them. So maybe we can come back to this in the end. And also, if anyone has any comments, I've put in the chat box our email address. So that is womenintrade@intersen.org. So if anything comes to mind, please feel free to send us an email. And also you'll see the draft text, and maybe that'll help provide some comments as well afterwards.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, that's absolutely fine, because it's maybe a bit abstract, but it will be, if it's not clear now, it will become more clear on the way. Keep this in mind. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Yona. So perhaps for the sake of time, we can table this for now and move on to the next topic. And here we just briefly wanted to inform you all, if you're not already aware. I do understand that several of you may have already participated in this process that's been going on. And it is to create a global definition of women-owned and women-led businesses and focus on terminology and general guidance. And it's being led by ITC and the Swedish Institute for Standards, along with the International Organization for Standardization. And the process, just to clarify, is called an International Workshop Agreement. And so just to take a step back and talk about some of the issues and the motivation behind creating a global definition. This came about really, we had a series of informal stakeholder conversations. In our discussion in January, for example, the topic of the definition of a woman-owned business was quite relevant. So what we've seen across different countries, we've seen three key issues. Number one, that there are multiple or different definitions being used, oftentimes within the same country. For example, where, you know, at least 51% of the company is owned or controlled by one or more women, or that, you know, a woman owns the highest share of capital or assets of a company, or there's a woman CEO or a director, or that the woman has is a signatory to the accounts of the company. So you can see all of these different criteria that come into play. So there's a bit of confusion there. We've also seen multiple terminologies being used, including women entrepreneur or women-owned business or women-owned small and medium enterprise. So it's important to kind of gain consensus on what this really means and you know, general understanding of the terms that are being used. And the last issue that we've seen is that several countries may not even have a definition. So with that being said, it's just to show that it's important across the board to kind of have this discussion. And we'd like to share with you a few of the outcomes that have happened over the last couple of months. So just an update on the process quickly. In August and September, we had a series of informal stakeholder consultations, as I mentioned. Ideally they would have been in person, but due to the COVID-19 pandemic, they were held online. But we were able to get inputs from over 340 stakeholders across almost 50 countries, which was great. Earlier in October, we had a 3-day workshop that had over, I think, 180 stakeholders from 57 countries that participated. And we really worked on creating a first draft of the IWA based on the discussion. Now we're circulating this to receive comments from stakeholders, and we'll be happy to share this with all of you also via email to see if you have any inputs, and if you see anything that hasn't been included thus far. And we'll be having the second workshop in December to really finalize this discussion. So perhaps I can go ahead and explain to you the different proposed definitions that we have that include the inputs from the first IWA workshop. But as I mentioned, maybe we table this topic to have a separate conversation dedicated to this. So before we begin, I just wanted to get a show of hands. Maybe you could write in the chat, if you have participated in this process, or if there are any comments that you'd like to make. And I can open the floor for a second after I share with you the definitions in case you're not able to see the screen. So basically, we came up with two options that would be relevant, I think, in this context. The first is the definition of a woman-owned business. So that's a business that has at least 51% ownership by one or more women, where the management and day-to-day operations are controlled by at least one woman, and that it's operated independently from other non-women-owned businesses. And there's also a woman that has that is a signatory to the company's legal accounts. And in comparison, we also had a women-led business, and that is where there's a woman CEO who's actively involved in the work of the business, that has at least 30% ownership, who is involved in management in day-to-day operations, and that there are one or more women decision makers, that there is at least 30% of the board, if a board exists, that's comprised of directors that are women. And as I mentioned before, also in terms of independence, that it is operated independently from other non-women-led or women-owned businesses, and a woman is also a signatory of the company's accounts. So maybe I can just open up the floor to see if there's anyone who wants to make a comment on this process, or who participated, and just any takeaways that you'd like to share. Okay. If not, please feel free, as you're thinking about this, to write in the chat. But I can move on to a few guidelines that came up that you may be wondering based on the definitions that I just shared with you. So these are issues related to management and control. When we talk about this issue, we're really trying to make sure that you know, women are genuinely managing and controlling the businesses to avoid the issue of fronting here. So this was a major part of the discussion that we had. The second was on independence, to see how we can verify that a woman is not, you know, substantially relying upon resources from other non-woman-owned businesses, and that's to avoid the issue of pass-through companies, which we can get into when we have the detailed discussion. Another major topic that came up was what happens when a woman-owned business is trying to scale up and the percentage of ownership is actually diluted when there is investment in the company. So because of that, there was a proposal to consider a woman-founded business so that you can also avoid the issue of dilution by investment. And then as the conversation sort of started to unfold, we talked about informal businesses and ended up talking about informal women-led enterprises and women-led cooperatives as potential standalone definitions. So this will be continue to be part of the IWA process, all of these guidelines, the definitions that we were discussing, and perhaps we can share with you the draft so you can see it for yourself. So with that, I think we can already start to talk about measures and targeted assistance strategies, and I hand over the floor to Astrid. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Yes, because before we go on, we would like you to understand the difference between measures and targeted assistance strategies. They will be both part of the gender responsive public procurement policy, but they work differently. As it says on the slide, what to implement depends on the purpose of the policy. If you only want to focus on more women-owned businesses participating, helping them to actually compete, but not necessarily directly steering on them to win, then measures are a great way of doing that. For example, you train women-owned businesses on tendering skills, teaching them how to approach a public procurement process. If you actually want women-owned businesses to win more contracts, you can adopt targeted assistance strategies. You would, for example, give women-owned businesses more points whilst you are evaluating the offers. The targeted assistance strategies will be discussed later today, and we will also continue with those on Thursday. But first, we will look at the measures. Next slide, please. Thank you. Procuring entities would apply measures to make their tenders more friendly for women-owned businesses. There are measures that you can always apply, that procuring entities can always apply, versus measures that should be considered per tender. And the goal is always to take away the barriers that women-owned businesses face whilst they are trying to compete for governmental contracts. We have categorized these barriers into 5 categories. You see them on the slide. The first is misfit tender design, second, excessive requirements, the third, poor practices by governments, the fourth, a lack of information, and the fifth, limited capability of women-owned businesses. We do not have to discuss all these measures in detail, but we've put them on the slides anyway so that you have them all, such that you can see that there are many things that can be done to make it easier for women-owned businesses to participate. Some measures do not cost anything, but others take more time, effort, and also some investment to make them happen. So what follows now are 5 slides with these categories of barriers. And I would like to pick out 2 examples to illustrate what we're talking about. Next slide, please. So the first is the very first one from the category misfit tender design. A lot of small businesses in general, and also women-owned businesses, complain that tenders are complex and that contracts are very large. So this is a barrier they are facing whilst they are trying to compete for public tender contracts. Then measures that can always be applied by procuring entities is to standardize and simplify procedures and documents as much as possible. Also to harmonize procedures and documents across different procuring entities, such that for different tenders, you don't have to do the same thing again and again and again. And then in the last cell of the top row, you see that there are measures to consider per tender. So for example, in the case of the barrier of complex tenders and large contracts, you could decide for that specific tender to break it down into different lots and or to restrict bidders from competing for all lots. So this is an example of how to address a specific barrier. The second example I would like to give you is from the fourth category of barriers. So maybe we can go a few slides further to the category that says lack of information. It's the sixth, yeah, this one, thank you. It is often heard that women-owned businesses and small and medium-sized enterprises in general get insufficient access to tender opportunities. So that's the first barrier that you see in this table. These businesses do not know about tender opportunities, or the barrier is high because information is simply not available. So what procuring entities can do is that they provide free access to contract notices and tender documentation, always, and that they use local languages where needed, such that they address more businesses than they would otherwise do. And then when it comes to measures to consider applying per tender, in this case, for the barrier of insufficient access to tender opportunities, you could say we are going to proactively invite women-owned businesses to bid. So this is another example of a measure of measures that can be addressed for these specific barriers. So maybe we can move on to 2 slides further. Yes, thank you. And what is important in the public procurement policy, in the gender responsive public procurement policy for the Gambia, is that you decide whether the implementation of such measures should be made compulsory through this policy. Because what you can do is in the policy mention that all procuring entities are supposed to adopt certain measures and are supposed to consider certain measures for every tender. So maybe we can ask the participants whether you think that this should be made compulsory in the gender responsive procurement policy. What are your thoughts?
I believe it should be made compulsory. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
You can hear me. But that's one thing. And ensuring that that is done would be the difficult thing. But then it should be compulsory if we want to ensure that these measures are adhered to. But by doing that in time, I think you stand a chance of achieving some successes as opposed to when you don't make it compulsory, you see. So looking at the two options, I would say we should strive to make it compulsory.
Thank you, Emily. That's a very clear opinion. I hear somebody else coming in. I think it's
Beatrice.
Beatrice. Go on, Beatrice.
Okay, thank you very much. I support Emily's view that it should be compulsory through the policy, because if it's not compulsory, it would be left to discretion. And discretion is not always based on the reality. It can take different dimensions and may not favor women. Two, I agree with her, is about enforcement, and that's an issue in this country. We've got so many laws and things like that that are very good, but implementing is the issue. But I believe, again, the authorities should put in some caution by way of implementation, so that if you don't implement this, these are also the consequences for that institution. If the institutions begin to face consequences, then they will now implement. But like she rightly said, implementation is our headache in this country, and we should really move beyond that, and maybe women can help to fight so that we move beyond that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Beatrice. That's very clear. And the point you are making about enforcing it and even putting sanctions, for example, on not complying, it's very important. And we will talk about that in the last topic of the policy, which is about roles and responsibilities. So we will come back to that. That's very important. And thank you. And Emily, also thank you for your view. Is there anybody else who wants to add something? Yes, I see somebody raising their hand. Go ahead, Babukar Kebe.
Hello, and good morning, colleagues. I just wanted to share also, let me congratulate all of you and thank you for bringing up this brilliant idea and the webinar to actually engage all stakeholders. We at GYCC, I think we've been crying out. We've been making a lot of statements and comments, and even argue during government meetings, and also cry out that there should be a quota by the GPPA to implement as a law that government procurement, should at least be 30% or 50% of government procurement should be given to Gambians, and then this should be enforced by the government offices, the government entities and enterprises. And I think it should also reflect, I think the policy should come up with some affirmative or deliberate actions that will compel GPPA to really also do a measure, and during their engagement with the National Assembly Select Committees, to look at each of these government institutions throughout the year, how much procurements were given to women, how many of these procurement awards were actually given to Gambians. And if that is done, we can actually achieve a lot of things in terms of the policy. And I wish that the policy does not only be a document and only to really be carried in our cupboards, like the other policies that we see. I want to say that should be, the policies also look at advocacy component, an advocacy committee, they call it, or a national committee that looks at all this procurement and have a lot of bilateral engagements on quarterly or yearly basis to review women, the amount of women that have received or won procurement bids in a year. We can use those statistics to advocate more for government and to also engage the National Assembly. Those are points I wanted to really put across, to say let us not only put it at policy and we try to, but let's come up with also frameworks and the strategies to really ensure that we get the procurement, the GPPA, to put this as a reflection even with awardings, and also when they go for their auditing, that these are things that they should also consider to ensure that it is a law, it becomes a policy that is actually anchored by every government enterprises, and of course encourage the Chamber of Commerce to also advocate for the private sector to adhere to this kind of regulations or policies. And then there could be also annual awards to entities or enterprises who have actually given the most awards or bids to women in the Gambia. And in this kind of recognition will encourage other government institutions, enterprises to really embrace the idea, and eventually we will get there. We will get at least 90% or not less than 80% of our procurements going to our own Gambia, especially young women. Thank you, over.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for that input. I hear you saying a few different things. So the first thing you addressed is the quota. And this is actually a very important topic, and we will get back to that because that's part of the targeted assistance strategies that we will discuss in the next topic. We have to keep in mind that we're focusing on women-owned businesses here and not necessarily on local businesses. That would be a different issue. But we will get back to you about this quota. Then you also said something that relates to keeping statistics. So building statistics about who wins contracts, who doesn't win, and to be able to evaluate this later. So this is a very, very good point because we need to, at one point, have more data about what's actually going on. And the great thing about doing this, implementing a gender responsive procurement policy, is that it can happen in parallel. So you would start doing something based on a quota, based on targeted assistance strategies and measures, and then you actually gather the data and you get the statistics from all the procuring entities. And then you also said something about awards, which I think is a really nice idea, to do some positive reinforcements and actually award those organizations, those procuring entities that do their best. So it would be good to look into the possibilities of actually doing that. So thank you so much. And let me see, then we have a comment in the chat from Emily that says, but then we are looking at a women-specific policy. Emily, could you please explain what you mean by that? And then I will go back to Babukar Kebe because he's raised his hand again.
I think the whole comment reads, I agree with Babukar by saying we should look at giving 50% of businesses procurement opportunities to Gambians. I think he made that comment. And I said, I agree by giving Gambians, that percentage and greater opportunities. Women stand a chance, especially Gambian women. But then we are looking at women-specific policies, procurement policy. So that's the entire comment.
Okay, thank you.
Don't lose focus, yeah.
Thank you. Babukar, is there something you wanted to add because I still see your hand raised?
No, sorry, let me lower it.
Oh, you're lowered. Okay, thank you. Then we have a hand raised by Fatoumata Bintou Diallo.
Yeah, good morning to everyone here. Like you said, my name is Fatoumata Bintou Diallo and I'm a Gambian journalist. I'm not into procurement yet, but will be interested to be in it. So I've been following a lot about ITC and what they're doing in the Gambia, which is a really great job. But like, should I say, I think it's Beatrice, like they said, having the policy is not a problem in this country, but the implementation of the policy is the problem in this country. We have so many policies in this country. People talk about policy, but then implementing it and making sure that people are adhering to it is a very, very big challenge in this country. And I don't know what ITC is going to do on this one to make sure that this policy that is out there to make sure that it's being implemented, and anybody who did not adhere to it has their own punishment, and then we can see, or the whole world will see, or these are the punishments attached to this failure of not implementing this policy. These are the punishments attached to it. So that's my question. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's a very valid point, because you know, when you draft a policy, it's just something on paper, right? And it's not happening yet. It's not creating any results unless it's actually enforced, unless it's actually implemented. And that is why ownership, local ownership of the policy is extremely important. So there needs to be an institute that takes responsibility, that owns it, and somebody, an organization that is responsible for actually implementing it. So this is something that we would have to discuss under the last topic, roles and responsibilities. And yeah, so we will get back to that because it's extremely important. I don't know if ITC will play a role in that actually, but it would be ideal if whilst we're drafting this policy, organizations step up and say, we are taking the responsibility of actually enforcing this. I see another hand raised from Fatu.
Yes, good morning, colleagues and partners on this call. I just wanted to say to Fatoumata Bintou Jallow that her point is very valid in terms of the challenge is not having the policies, but it's actually enforcement. But I also want to say that ITC is a development partner, a development agency. We cannot be responsible for enforcement of policies or laws. However, we work with the stakeholders, that is the government, the private sector, and civil society, to see where we are able to support them to be able to do that. But we cannot take responsibility for something like that. But obviously, you have the GPPA, which is the procurement authority and also in charge of regulations. So once you have the policy, there is the act, but you also have the regulations, which would help, hopefully, for one to be able to enforce what has already been agreed. But just for clarity, that ITC's support doesn't go that far to enforce, laws in the country. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have reached consensus in terms of actually incorporating measures in the policy. If you have a different opinion or you have something more to share, please feel free to do so in the chat or to email later to the address that Anna put in the chat. We actually keep a copy of the chat, so we will be able to incorporate everything that is being said. And then I think from here, we can conclude on the topic of measures. It is now 12:30 and we have to stop, 12:30 on my side. We have to stop in half an hour. So we were hoping to be able to discuss a little bit more on the actual target, or some people call it a quotum. So I would suggest that we round off the topic of measures and that we move to the next topic of targeted assistance strategies. Oh, I see also that GPPA is now here. So maybe we can first give him the floor. Anna, can you take over and lead us?
Okay, good morning from here. I am Samba Tambura, representing the Director General GPPA. I've been following the deliberation, the discussion. They are indeed very fruitful, educative. But just to buttress on the last discussion on the issue of enforcement, it is very important that when policies are made, they are of course enforced. Unfortunately, as far as our body of procurement law is concerned, the party responsible for enforcement wasn't made very clear. Of course, especially with specific reference to the proposed 2020 Procurement Act. There are provisions, of course, to cater for the disfavored groups, and that really included women-owned businesses. We are very much concerned about it. Of course, and violations may not be entertained. But when it comes to enforcement that hasn't been made extremely very clear. Notwithstanding, we are still in touch with the Ministry of Justice, because as we speak, presently the draft bill is at the Ministry of Justice, and we have also contacted the National Assembly to ensure that before things are finalized, we are invited once more time to at least polish some of the issues that are not very clear. This is very important. As far as GPA is also concerned, we are working on statistics, especially when it comes to women-owned businesses. It was really a challenge on our part to even know exactly the percentage allocation for women-owned businesses. That is for the past contracts award. It was difficult on our part because the department responsible for statistics wasn't very active in the recent past, but that is history now. We have really concentrated on gathering statistics to get the exact data as to the allocation of contracts per percentage to women, so that we can also inform the policy makers, because you can only inform the policy makers, the executive, etc., when you are very much equipped with reliable data. That's why we are really working on this thing. The other issue is on capacity development. This is very important, definitely. Of recent, I think we are all aware there was a kind of a food support program conducted by the Ministry of Trade, where most of the contracts were given to local businesses, including women-owned businesses. But during the implementation of such contracts, we are reliably informed, and also from our statistics, that some women could not deliver as per the contractual requirements. And a further study, a further probe into the challenges reveals that some of the women do not really have the capacity. That was one. And also others have the problem of proper packaging. Because when it comes to tender, most of the time there are requirements, and you as a contractor, as a bidder, or as a business, whatever, you are expected to reply or to make an offer. And this offer you are making should include all the requirements. But most of the time, there are certain requirements that are either intentionally left out or probably unknowingly left out. So that brings us to the issue of capacity. So we've realized that some women do not have the capacity to really organize or prepare a proper package when it comes to responding to procurement requirements. So this has been an issue, but notwithstanding, we have just developed a training program targeting women-owned businesses. And just last week, we have reviewed it, and very soon it will be up for women. So I think basically this is what I think I can say for now. Thank you all for the wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tambura, representing GPPA. That was it was very nice that you were able to get connected and that we were able to hear from you. And we've taken note of all of these points for our minutes as well, so that we can share with all of the stakeholders. So thank you very much. Perhaps because we do have about 20 minutes left, since we've heard from sorry, are you able to hear me still? I think there is. a break? Yes. Okay, great. Thank you. Apologies for that. So since we've discussed the measures and how we can address the different categories of barriers that we've discussed before, we can start to move on to targeted assistance strategies. And we have 4 that we wanted to present and discuss with you. I will hand the floor over to Yona to take over, and perhaps we can focus on the first one for today and continue on Thursday. So Yona, over to you.
Thank you, Anna. And very nice to hear from GPPA that all these actions are already taken. Also in January, it was my impression that GPPA is very much onto it. So that's super. With regards to targeted assistance strategies, we have explained that these are actions that you can take and that are aimed at ensuring that women-owned businesses are able to win more government contracts. There are 4. The first one is generic, and we would like to discuss that today because looking at the clock, I think we have still time to have valuable inputs on this. And then the next 3 we will discuss on Thursday because, well, basically we plan to do that on Thursday also, but we should have a proper time and not do that in a hurry. So I will not go into the other 3 today, but let's focus on target. It was already mentioned by Babukar, for example, that you can have a target or quota, if you will. And what we mean with a target is that a certain percentage of all procurement spend of the government is realized at women-owned businesses. In the introduction, we said that it's now like 1% or maybe less, and it's definitely very small. You can have a target if you want to improve the participation of women-owned businesses in public procurement. Actually, you must have a target because this gives you a goal, and if you, it also gives you a way to determine whether you are making progress and how much progress this is. Because let's say that now you're not sure, but maybe it's like 1% and the target is maybe 10%, then you can measure where you are. The idea is to have a target, which is a percentage of all government spend in the Gambia. So that's the combined spend of all procuring entities. And also this percentage is not something that you will realize in 1 year time, but you will develop. And then, for example, after 5 years, you will have established this target. So the first question is, does the Gambia want to have a target percentage? And I do take the freedom to already answer that question because I think that the Gambia wants that. It was already mentioned, we have discussed it also extensively in January. But then the next question is, what percentage should this target be? And well, our question to you as participants is, what is a realistic but ambitious target? Obviously, the target should not be too high because then it might be demotivating if you're not getting there, but it should also not be too low because then, well, it seems as if you don't have high expectations and it might not fuel ambition in the way that you want to. The slide can just stay on the, yes, thank you. So question to you, what is a realistic percentage and how many years would the Gambia like to take to achieve this percentage? You can respond either in the chat or raise your hand and take the floor. Who would like to comment?
So perhaps if I could jump in, we had a comment earlier about 50% of the tenders going to Gambians in general, but specific to women-owned businesses. Were there any ideas on the percentage?
Maybe to give you an idea, in January we said maybe, well, there was a discussion and nothing was agreed. The example of Kenya often pops up, where they have a percentage target of 30. This, however, includes all minority groups, so that it's women, but also disabled people and youth, for example. So it should be realistic. Who would like to comment? What is the percentage that shows that you take it serious?
Can I come in?
Please.
Yes, I believe at the last meeting and when we also had this other meeting with GPPA, we had suggested 30%. And the response we were getting was that even the 30%, we should not just aim at getting it one time. We should try maybe from now to 2025, was it, to attain that goal. Because there was this discussion that if you aim at 30%, then you are locking yourself up. And also, are your women ready? Do they have the capacity? So that when you call for 30% and then women are not ready. But from my own personal view, I think we should still stick to the 30% that we have identified earlier, because like it said here in the presentation, without a percentage, what are you measuring? We cannot measure anything if we don't set a target. So this target that we have set is what we want to stick to and then pursue it. And this should be the country level percentage. So this is where we were. And again, the issue was, we wanted the percentage to be in the policy. And they were telling us, you don't have to put it in the policy. It can come in the rules and regulations. So there were divergent views. And finally, when we checked the document that was going to the National Assembly, there was nothing like what we had discussed in the document. So this is the dilemma we are in the Gambia. Thank you.
Thank you, Beatrice. GPPA wants to comment?
Yes, thank you very much. That was the exact discussion we had with them. Yeah, exactly. The issue of target or percentage is something that is a bit delicate in a sense that it would not be appropriate for the exact percentage to be included in the Public Procurement Act. It would be better to include it in the subsequent regulation or the instruction, because at our level, in our country procurement system, we have 3 working documents: the Public Procurement Act, the Public Procurement Regulation, and the Public Procurement Instruction. The act at that level to indicate a specific percentage, let's say 30%, because that was the discussion. With consultation and benchmarking internationally, it wasn't advisable to specifically indicate that percentage in the act. But that wasn't an indication of reluctance on our part. It was an indication of trying to adopt best practices. But at our level, even for your information, even our forms, these are templates, our procurement forms, the templates, we have streamlined them to cater for gender provision, specifically women-owned businesses. Recently, as we speak, that in-house training is ongoing, so that we have adequate statistics. But we are very much ready and prepared to incorporate this target, proposed target percentage, 30%, in one of our documents, but not the act, but in one of our documents, hopefully the regulation or the instruction. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to respond to that and also to a comment that I see in the chat. To start with the chat, it's from Ashim Saineka. And the comment is that it's best to have a target that is based on data, which is absolutely true. Ideally, you have all these data and then set a realistic yet ambitious target. But in this case, not all data that we would like to have is available yet. So what we advise is to have a percentage as a target anyway. And you can't agree on that based on data or on, let's say, a scientific discussion. So it's partly based on, well, a feeling or the trust that you have as a country that you can realize it. But then as soon as an implementation project starts, or actually already has started, as GPPA has explained, data collection starts and evaluation, quarterly, for example, and at least yearly, shows where you are and also enriches the data that you have year on year, so that, let's say in 3 to 4 years time, you do have this good data. And maybe by then you have also good reasons to adjust the target. But for now, we should, it's our advice to set the target anyway, based on what you know and based on what you expect. As with regards to where this target percentage is officially registered, so to say, I can understand why it is not included in the Act itself. We are now drafting this preferential procurement policy, and definitely it will be part of the policy. And also this policy should go through a formal approval procedure and be one of the starting points for the implementation program. So this percentage will have a, let's say, certain status, and also the organization that will be the owner of this procurement policy will have to account for progress made at least every year. That's the way we see it. So it is important that we now define a target percentage. And the 30% has been suggested in January, and it is suggested again now. Is there anyone who has a question or wants to propose another target? Ashim, I see that you have your hand raised. Please take the floor.
Hello, you should be able to unmute yourself. I see that you're
Yeah. Yes, I think it's unmuted now. Thank you very much, Yona. Actually, I think the issue I'm trying to raise here is in connection with what is existing, on the ground. Because all of us here, let's say all Gambians who are here, we all know that women in businesses, it's like targeting just a selected few. You have few people who have the capital and maybe the education to do that. And if we want to, it's just like a guesstimate. If we want to estimate how many people would that be, I don't think you will have more than 50 Gambian women who are into, serious businesses that can do procurement, public procurement, for instance. That might even be far less than that. So why I'm saying that we need to have the existing data to know how many women, are into this procurement, into business, women-owned businesses. Their level of literacy is also important to know, because the issue of capacity building has to be taken into consideration. If it is, for instance, a procurement of, let's say, furniture and so on and so forth, that is something maybe that can be, manageable. But there are other certain procurement processes that you want to go under public procurement. It's not possible to do, if the capacity is not there. So right? If at all we decide on going for the target, I think 30% is over ambitious because we all know what is existing in the country. Okay, initially when I raised my hand regarding the issue of, whether it is the government procurement or procurement funded by government, or is it the procurement funded by donor agencies? When I say donor, of course, government, but on loan basis, or on credit basis. Why I'm saying that is that for those particular procurements, it is specifically for the open to all and sundry. It is not for women, neither is it for men, or neither for Gambians or not. It is something that is possible to do, but that means going back to the drawing board and having our governors of these multilateral institutions to do the negotiations. So if you want to come up with a policy now and say, yes, this is supposed to be for for all procurements, you will get to a certain stage where you cannot move, because you cannot reverse a policy which is contradictory to what is pertaining in other institutions. So I'm not really sure you understand what I'm saying. So I'm saying we should give women the chance, to do it, but let it be all women. And we try to identify those who have the capacity to do it and those who don't have the capacity, and what we need to do to those who don't have the capacity, because they are all Gambians also. Another thing is also the issue of sole proprietorship in this country. Most women in this country, or not only women, I said most businesses in this country, I just what to call it, run their businesses on sole proprietorship, where it's either yourself and your family. So if you're talking about public procurement, I think that is something that will come with people coming together. So the issue of having businesses into joint venture has to be put into the policy, that if you're going to compete in a public procurement, you need to go on partnership with 1, 2, 3, or 4 different other women, and then in the process get people who are not at your own level to try to build the capacity. So these are all the issues I think we need to look into. I think I started saying it in January when we had the meeting, and I think I still stand by the point that really some more work needs to be done, or else we will put all this nice, and that is the reason why we have all these nice laws and policies, and they are not enforced, because we do something halfway, we cannot proceed. That is the problem with Gambia. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your comment, and I understand where you're coming from. And as we said already, yes, of course, a policy is on paper, but what happens in the real world, and so ownership and implementation power is very important. We will also include the assignment of roles and responsibilities in the policy. As for now, with regards to the target, I do understand that it's very hard to agree on a percentage if we don't have the underlying data, or if we feel that still a lot of women-owned businesses are maybe not yet capable to compete, but they will be in time if the measures that we have been talking about are implemented and are going to sort effect. We are nearing 1 o'clock, so we should end this meeting, but I would just like to point out that please, you can put your comments in the chat, and the email address has also been shared, so do share your thoughts on the percentage, and we can take that with us and come back on that on Thursday. Also, there is little data, but maybe there is data, and maybe this data is with the GPPA, or maybe this data is with other institutions. So it's also important to know what data exists and where this exists, and if we can use it for determining this percentage. We don't have enough time left to do that now, but I would like to invite you and share if you know about data, and also your suggestions for the percentage, either in the chat or send it to the email address that you can find in the chat in the beginning. But looking at the time, Anna, I think we should wrap up now, and hopefully we can welcome some input on the email. And can you close the meeting for us, Anna?
Yes, thank you very much, Yona. So I would like to just on the point that you made last, if there's any data that you would like to share beyond what we have from GPPA as well, you can feel free to send it to womenintrade@intrasend.org. Again, that was the one that's in the chat, so we're happy to receive this. I would also like to thank you all for taking the time to be here today for this discussion. We've taken note of your different inputs. Again, today we've only discussed the targeted assistance strategy of a target percentage, but we'll continue the discussion on Thursday at 10 o'clock Gambia time. And we will send a reminder via Zoom so that you can get the link just in case. And we really appreciate your input so that we can make sure that the policy is best suited for women to succeed. So with that, I'd just like to hand the floor over to representatives from GPPA and MOTI for also closing remarks for this meeting, and also that at the end of Thursday's session, along with the recording and the notes, we'll share the slides as well so that you can use them for your resources. Thank you so much. Mr. Tambura, could I hand the floor to you, please? Okay, perhaps there's a connection issue. So with that, I'd like to close the meeting. Thank you so much for joining, and we'll see you on Thursday.
Thank you.
Thank you.